If a strange girl knocked on your door in the middle of a snowstorm and whispered, "I know the truth about this town," would you let her in or lock the door and pretend you never heard a thing? In a town where everything is buried beneath silence, and those who speak out simply vanish. Sometimes the truth doesn't knock. It bursts in and demands a price. Before we dive into the shadows of Cliffmore Valley, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the twist that'll keep you on edge till the very last second. This story begins at Glenhaven Estate. Landon Barrett, a reclusive man wrapped in silence, lives alone at Glenhaven Estate, where snow falls year-round like a blanket hiding memories too painful to face. People in town call him the ghost at the edge of the woods, not because he frightens anyone, but because no one dares get close. But tonight, the gate bell rings. A girl, Aurora Kingsley, stands at the door, shivering in the heart of a blizzard. Her face is pale, her hands trembling as she clutches a weathered, nearly illegible letter. Her voice is barely a whisper. "I need you, before they find me." Landon doesn't ask who they are. He says nothing. He lets her in, not out of kindness, but because in her eyes he sees something achingly familiar, the same look his late wife once had, terror, buried beneath something even darker. Down in the basement of Glenhaven, Landon lays a torn map on the table. Next to it, the letter Aurora brought. The edges line up perfectly. Then, almost without thinking, he reaches into a drawer and pulls out a small fabric pouch. Inside, a broken child's bracelet. He runs a thumb over it and murmurs, 10 years, and I still haven't found her." As Aurora falls asleep by the fireplace, Landon steps out onto the porch. His eyes scan the snow-laden woods. It's the same trail he's walked for a decade, searching, hoping, and always returning with nothing, except his own footprints in the snow. A lone howl breaks the stillness. Then, light, a flash in the trees, a signal from someone watching, and in the corner of the screen, a faded headline flickers into view. "Trust no one in Cliffmore Valley." Evelyn Hawthorne, an award-winning journalist once known for exposing political corruption, now sits in a dimly lit office, surrounded by walls covered in maps, case files, and red string tangled like veins across a beating heart. She's no longer chasing stories. She's tracking a hunt. On her desk lies a worn-out file stamped faintly, "Parker case missing since 1999, closed due to lack of evidence." But Evelyn knows the real reason had nothing to do with evidence. It was power. Outside, the doorbell rings. A delivery man leaves behind an unmarked package. Inside, an old magnetic tape. When played, it's nothing but ragged breathing, the slow drip of water, and one chilling whisper. Glenhaven isn't safe anymore. Evelyn drives through the night to Glenhaven Estate. The tape loops in her car for the 5th time. That voice, it's not just a warning. It sounds like a plea. When she arrives, Aurora is standing behind the glass door, wide-eyed. And Landon? Gone. Into the woods. Was it impulse, or was it orchestrated? Inside the study, Evelyn finds a second map, one that doesn't appear in any official town records. On this version, Glenhaven isn't marked as private property. It's labeled Temporary Tactical Control Zone, stamped in faded red ink. That's when Landon returns. He looks at her, not surprised, not angry. Just one question. Did you lose someone too? Evelyn says nothing. She simply places a child's necklace on the table, identical to the one Landon keeps. And just like that, the web tightens. Evelyn realizes she's no longer the one investigating the story. She's part of the file now. At Rosepine Barn, Griffin Maddox, a reclusive former soldier, quietly clears sheets of ice from the animal pens. His calloused hands move with unexpected tenderness as he tends to an old wolf caught in a rusted trap, carefully cleaning the wound and stitching it shut. He doesn't say much. He never does. But every careful motion, every stitch, every gentle touch is its own kind of apology. Not just to the animal, but to himself, for the things he did, and for the things he never forgave. Then, something catches his eye in the hay at the far end of the barn. A faded student ID card, edges worn with time. The name Lillian Cortez, grade 10, Cliffmore High. The girl listed on it was declared missing 17 years ago. Griffin stares at the card, frozen. Then slowly, his eyes rise to the old beam above. Scratched into the wood, almost erased by time, are the words, "I didn't deserve to be left behind." He steps outside, the card still in hand, gaze fixed on the forest swallowed in snow. A memory stirs. The day he came back from war was the same day his ex told him her little sister, Lillian, was gone. He never searched. He didn't think he had the right. But maybe now, Cliffmore Valley is offering him a second chance to find something he lost a long time ago. And maybe to make things right. Celeste Marlowe had only just moved into Stonewell Cabin, tucked at the northern edge of town. Every morning she rose before the sun, painting in silence. Like colors were the only thread holding together the pieces of a heart that had long since splintered. What most don't know is that Celeste used to be a forensic sketch artist, drawing the faces of the missing from the shattered words of those left behind. The job haunted her so deeply, she didn't just walk away from it. She ran. One winter afternoon, while clearing out the old storage shed behind the cabin, she found a strange drawing. A little girl standing in front of Maple and Company, market, eyes tilted skyward, lips curled in the faintest smile. What sent a chill down Celeste's spine wasn't the portrait itself, but the signature at the bottom, Lillian Cortez, 2006. Celeste hadn't drawn this, but the style was unmistakably her own. And Lillian, the same name Griffin Maddox had found on a long-lost student ID, buried in the hay of Rose Pine Barn. Tears welled in Celeste's eyes. This was the only piece in her cabin she hadn't painted, yet it captured a sorrow she'd carried for years, a grief too familiar, too silent. She realized then, if anyone could help give the unseen a voice, it was her. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to hold an exhibition, not to celebrate art, but to call out the names the world had forgotten. Jasper Cross was once a rising star in the courtrooms of Rainford City, a place where winning a case often mattered more than finding the truth. But one mistake, one moment of compromise, shattered everything. He walked away from that world and returned to Evergreen Bluff Trail, the rural road where he and his father once argued endlessly about what was right. Now in Cliffmore Valley, Jasper works from a cramped office above an old typewriter repair shop. He takes the cases no one else wants, forgotten elders with no one to defend them, young people accused of crimes they didn't commit, verdicts buried under files as yellowed as the backs of the men they condemned. That day, while re-examining a 17-year-old assault case, Jasper stumbled upon something buried deep, an original medical report. The page trembled in his hand, because the name at the bottom, the doctor who signed off on it, was Noah Cross, his father. A moment of breathless stillness followed, not because of what the page revealed, but because, for the first time, Jasper saw it clearly. His father had once chosen silence over truth. He folded the file and slipped it into his coat. He wasn't angry, but he knew. Starting now, he would never step back again, not just for justice, but for the fathers who can no longer make it right, and the sons who still have time to choose differently. One snowy night, the path into the forest disappeared under a blanket of white. Aurora Kingsley, trembling, exhausted, stumbled toward the wooden gates of Silver Pine Haven. She didn't know what this place was. All she knew was instinct. And instinct whispered, if she didn't knock now, she might not survive the night. The door creaked open slowly, revealing Landon Barrett, the man known for his silence, his cold stare, and a heart rumored to have no space for mercy. But in that moment, his eyes paused on her frost-bitten hands, cracked and shaking. And instead of closing the door, he stepped back. Aurora sat curled near the fire, her body still shivering. Landon placed a steaming cup of tea on the table, then said nothing. She didn't ask anything either. No words were needed, just the warmth was enough to break her. She wept. Later, when the storm calmed, she tried to leave, But as she crossed the threshold, snow suddenly collapsed from the roof in a heavy sheet. Landon lunged forward, throwing himself over her, shielding her from the blow. They both crashed into the frozen earth. Blood seeped through the tear in his shoulder, but his eyes never left hers. "Are you all right?" he asked. And for the first time in years, Aurora felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Someone who didn't care who she had been, only that she was safe now. Beneath the flickering lights of Ridge Hill Market, Sienna Whitlock, a small woman with quiet resolve, ran a charity no one officially funded. With cans of soup, threadbare blankets, and warm greetings, she made sure the lost souls of this town were never truly forgotten. But that night, while sorting through a pile of abandoned tax files after a warehouse cleanup, a stack of faded documents slipped from a broken drawer. They weren't hers. Yet the name on the folder made her breath catch. Project Rookfall, Financial Subterranean Route. Sienna didn't sleep. She wasn't an investigator. She didn't have anyone she could trust. But something deep inside told her what she had just uncovered might explain the sudden, senseless wave of property seizures around the market over the past 3 years, including the pharmacy lot owned by an old man who died of a heart attack the same day he was evicted. The next morning, Sienna walked to Willowshade Hall. She said nothing to anyone. She simply slipped an envelope into the anonymous mailbox labeled, "For those who were once afraid." No name, no explanation, just one handwritten line. "If my life can buy them justice, then let me stay missing." As Cliffmore Valley began to fracture from the inside out, Blitz, the loyal German shepherd at Griffin Maddox's side, was the only thing tethering him to the world of the living. No leash, no commands, just one look between them, and everything was understood. That morning, frost clung to the roof of Rose Pine Barn like frozen breath. Griffin headed out to check the traps, his daily ritual, when Blitz suddenly barked, sharp and urgent, tugging him in the opposite direction. Through the underbrush near Briarwood Trail, they found him, a boy, trembling, rail-thin, wearing a threadbare shirt torn at the shoulder, barefoot on the frozen ground. He couldn't speak, but the way he clung to Blitz's collar, as if anchoring himself to life, told Griffin more than words ever could. Griffin carried the boy back to Rosepine. There were needle marks on his arm, wrong ones, not medical. That night, as the boy drifted into an exhausted sleep, Blitz kept his eyes locked on the door. Griffin sat by the window, suspicion and helplessness etched deep into his face, and for the first time in years he whispered to Blitz, "We're not alone anymore. Are we, old friend?" Blitz gently rested his head on Griffin's boot, silent and sure, as if to say, sometimes, in a place like Cliffmore Valley, what pulls us back from the edge isn't another person. It's a loyal soul who never left our side. Beckett Hale, the founder of the Lantern Fork, was one of the rare few in Cliffmore Valley who welcomed both the homeless and the high-powered politicians into his diner, and never asked why they came. In this town, that was as good as signing your own death warrant. That night after a late shift, Beckett found the back kitchen door blown open. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wood, carrying the faint scent of gasoline, and a note taped to the window, "Stay silent or everything burns." He froze. On the old table, the same one where orphan kids once ate warm bread, sat a glass jar stuffed with gasoline-soaked rags. The ignition switch had already been wired in. All it needed was time. Beckett walked over and disarmed it. No police, no phone calls. He knew, if even one word leaked, the people he'd been protecting would be the first to suffer. In the dark, a flicker of flame sparked from the stove. Beckett lit a cigarette, something he hadn't touched in over a decade. His eyes drifted to the wall, where an old photo of him and his mother still hung. She once told him, "If you ever have to choose between silence and your conscience, let them burn the place down. Just don't let them burn your soul." And in that moment, Beckett chose to speak. The next morning, the diner was ashes. But the footage, captured from a rooftop camera showing the entire break-in, had already made its way into Evelyn's hands. The truth had begun to surface, but the first price paid was a man with nowhere left to come home to. Late at night, down a dust-covered corridor of Glenhaven Estate, Evelyn Hawthorne pushed open a heavy wooden door and stepped inside, carrying a file she knew could cost someone their life the moment it changed hands. Landon Barrett stood in the shadows, the light casting half his face in a slant of golden ash. No anger, just his eyes, dark, endless, watching her every step. "You know," she said, her voice unsteady but her gaze razor-sharp, "all those red-pinned maps of mine, they all led here. Every disappearance starts at Glenhaven." Landon said nothing. Instead, he reached for an old leather journal, its edges scorched, faintly smelling of smoke. He laid it gently on the table. On the first page, in slanted handwriting, it read, "The ones who should have lived." Evelyn flipped it open. Her father's name sat in the middle of the list. Her eyes blurred. She staggered back, breath catching. "You kept all these names?" she whispered. "After all these years?" Landon's voice was low. "I never forgot any of them. I just didn't know how to save them." The silence that followed landed like a gut punch. Evelyn placed her hand on the journal. "Then let me help," she said. "But this time, we don't get to be wrong." For a moment their eyes met, not as the keeper of secrets and the seeker of truth, but as two survivors, trying to learn how to trust again in a town that had long since forgotten how. And for the first time, Evelyn saw Landon nod. Willowshade Hall looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it pulsed with red lights flickering like the heartbeat of something predatory. Dozens of surveillance rooms lined its hidden corridors, feeding on secrets. Declan Rhodes, once known as the man who never gave up, stepped into the icy basement, his footsteps echoing like a countdown in the empty hallway. A grainy monitor flickered to life. Footage rolled, but cut abruptly in the middle. A familiar figure stepped into frame, then vanished. The name attached to that file? Celeste. Declan's hand trembled. He'd always seen her as just a passionate artist, nothing more. But now the footage, tampered, edited, tied her to something much darker. Who was controlling the surveillance network, and for what? Suddenly, the metallic screech of a hinge ripped through the silence behind him. A door began to close. He spun, gun drawn by instinct. No one. Just a single notebook tumbling from a nearby shelf. Declan picked it up. Inside, a list of individuals marked under observation. The final name, Declan Rhodes. His heart clenched. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. He was part of it. A pawn. A target. In a game someone had been playing for far too long. And before he left that room, he pressed a hand against the cold concrete wall and muttered, more to himself than anyone else, "If I don't come back, burn this place down." In the attic room above Ridge Tools and Timber, Vivian Alcott sat at her desk, the dim light casting shadows across an unfinished map. But it wasn't a map of the town. It was a web, a network of surveillance points, hidden escape routes, and the locations of anonymous witnesses. She'd been building it for years, not with GPS or satellite images, but with memories. The memories of those who had been hurt and silenced. That night, a stranger walked in. He didn't threaten her. He didn't need to. He simply placed a folder on her desk, containing the full transfer of ownership for the entire company. "Sign it and nothing changes. Don't, and take one last look at your map." Vivian didn't speak. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what this was. If she signed, the underground system she'd built, meticulously, quietly, would disappear forever. But if she refused, her family, Ela, her only niece, could be swallowed by the storm she'd been holding at bay all these years. Her hand trembled. Ink bled across the page. But she didn't sign. Instead, Vivian reached into a hidden drawer and pulled out the master copy of the map. Then calmly, she lit it on fire. Not out of fear, but because she had memorized every line. And as the map turned to ash, she spoke just one line. "Others can draw the paths, but I'm the one who knows why they lead where they do." Thorne Delaney, a young entrepreneur once tangled in a financial scandal back in the city, came to Silver Pine Haven hoping to start over. What he didn't expect was the first thing to greet him, the sharp, skeptical gaze of Sienna Whitlock, the woman quietly leading the town's underground support network through Ridge Hill Market. They first met at a charity auction hosted by Vivian Alcott, Thorne blending in beneath the guise of an art-loving investor. But when a copy of the Glenhaven files surfaced inside a box of discarded documents Sienna stumbled upon, the mask began to slip. She asked him, point blank, "Do you know what this is?" Thorne stared at the page. Those strings of symbols and codes, painfully familiar. 5 years ago, he was paid to encrypt them. He didn't speak. He simply nodded. And in that quiet moment, suspicion melted into something colder. Truth. Two people now standing at the edge of the same fault line. One who once helped build the system, and one determined to bring it down. That night, Thorne sent a private code to Miles Thornton. The message was simple. They know we have it. 2 days left. Then he removed the tracking watch from his wrist and pressed it into Sienna's hand. If I disappear, don't look for me. Finish the map. Don't let justice die with me. Tessa Whitman was once the only daughter of a powerful, respected family, until a scandalous lawsuit tore it all apart. Everything vanished in a single winter. Now she kept her head down at the Hearthstone Cafe, a quiet little shop tucked at the end of the street, where no one in Cliffmore Valley recognized her as the former Princess of Ridge Hill. That's where she met Camden Blake, a quiet figure working in the back kitchen, whose eyes always seemed fixed on something far beyond the espresso machines. One day, a short circuit knocked out the cafe's power. Camden rushed to the utility room to protect the server. Tessa followed and stopped cold. Behind a flaking wall, she saw it, a massive map carefully pinned, its paths winding through town like veins. It was a visual match to the leaked routes from the Glenhaven files. She stared. Are these the people who went missing? Camden didn't deny it. He simply replied, I'm nobody, but I lost someone no one ever remembered. Since then, I've collected what they tried to bury. Tessa said nothing. She didn't need to. In that instant, she knew. Her journey was no longer about rebuilding her own life. It was about helping others keep from losing theirs. Vivian Alcott, founder of Ridge Tools and Timber, had once been the emblem of rebuilding and hope in the quiet reach of Stonewall Cabin. With skilled hands and unshakable resolve, she didn't just craft tools built to last. She rebuilt lives, training dozens of jobless locals to work with willow shade wood and earn their dignity back, one plank at a time. But one late afternoon, a package arrived at her workshop, no return address. Inside, a handcrafted leather map, disturbingly precise. It detailed the routes of illegal cash transfers and marked anonymous sites connected to the Ridge Hill Slush Fund. The worst part? Most of it was drawn using the very same drafting techniques she had taught her trainees. Someone had twisted her craft into the skeleton of a money laundering empire, and now they were forcing her to sign away Ridge Tools and Timber, to make it look like she'd orchestrated the whole thing. Vivian stood in the heart of her workshop, the place that once echoed with sawdust, laughter, and second chances, now flipped into evidence against her. She could have stayed silent, nodded, signed, and ended it all. But across the room stood Finn, a boy she'd once pulled off the streets, gripping a blueprint in sawdust-covered hands, voice shaking. If you sign, who's left to believe in kindness? Vivian lowered the pen. Instead of signing, she pulled out a different document, a master comparison chart, one that proved the blueprints had been altered. She didn't run. She stood tall. If I have to lose everything to protect the ones who believed in me, then let me lose it the right way. Maddox Reeve was not the man Cliffmore Valley believed him to be. Once a covert systems analyst for the State Integrity Bureau, Maddox vanished after stealing the only existing copy of the Glenhaven files, a dossier powerful enough to expose the manipulation of the courts, the police, and the entire local government. He came to Glenhaven Estate hoping to bury it all, his past, his name, his guilt, living quietly beneath the snow-covered pines, just another man with calloused hands and broken sleep. But fate doesn't forget. One evening, while fixing a broken stable lock for Landon, a small device slipped from his coat pocket, a heavily encrypted USB drive. Aurora, curious, plugged it into Landon's computer. The screen flickered, then lit up with 5 chilling words. Glenhaven Files, Confidential, level Omega. Minutes later, the lights at Glenhaven Estate went black. A black SUV rolled to a stop outside the gate. Three men in gray stepped out. No introductions, no hesitation. They weren't locals. Landon raised his gun. Aurora screamed, and Maddox stepped forward, shielding them both. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "Let them go. I'm done running." Then, a gunshot. But it wasn't Landon's weapon. It came from the trees. In a blur, the three men dropped. Clean, precise. Someone was watching, and they just acted first. Maddox stood frozen, blood splattered across his chest, eyes locked on the shadow beyond the tree line. Then he turned back to Landon, breath sharp and low. "We're out of time. This winter won't stay white for long." Just when it felt like the darkness had swallowed everything, an unexpected audio file crackled to life over the old broadcast system at Maple and Company. "Market." The voice was trembling, but unmistakably clear. It was Miles Thornton, the man who vanished without a trace after breaking into the City Hall accountant's office. "If you're hearing this, I'm still alive, and I saw something no one should ever see." At that exact moment, surveillance footage from Glenhaven Estate was hijacked. A video flashed on screen. Miles, disheveled, blood smeared on his sleeve, locked in a stone room with no windows. The walls behind him were covered in maps identical to those in the Glenhaven files. He turned the camera toward himself. "I don't know how much time I have, but go to Rosepine Tunnel, the second door. Everything is there." The recording cut, and then a strange sound echoed, like the slow, haunting spread of a crack across glass. Inside Maple and Company Market, where the townsfolk had gathered, a painting at the back, one of Isla Wren's, suddenly began to bleed from the canvas. Thick red tears sliding down the frame. The room froze. Aurora turned to Landon. "Did you hear that?" He didn't answer. He stepped through the front door, snow falling gently around him, his eyes fixed on the tree line to the north. "This winter won't stay white." The screen faded to black. Then a line appeared, stark against the silence. "Cliffmore Valley. Nothing disappears forever." End credits roll. A silver-masked figure emerges from the trees, clutching a USB drive etched with two words, "Level Omega." This is only the beginning. As word of Miles's recording spread across Cliffmore Valley, Nora Kingsley, a former international human rights envoy, arrived at Willowshade Hall with one mission: to negotiate legal protection for anyone brave enough to go public with the Glenhaven files. But she never expected that the very people who had once invited her to Silver Pine Haven were now the ones ready to silence the truth. The meeting was held in a wood-paneled room, red oak gleaming under the afternoon light. On the table sat Nora's proposal, 47A, Civil Whistleblower Protection. The draft bore preliminary signatures, but as she presented it, the town administrator crushed out his cigarette, smirking. "You think those people just vanished on their own?" A light touch on her shoulder, a glance from her personal aide. That was all it took. Nora knew then. She had stepped into the wolf's den. As tensions escalated, the door creaked open. A figure stepped in. Aurora Kingsley, Nora's sister, long believed dead. Calmly, Aurora placed a small object on the table. A blood-streaked ring, belonging to the former sheriff, missing for 10 years. Her voice cut through the silence. They didn't disappear. They were chosen to be erased. Nora met her sister's gaze. For the first time, not with diplomacy, but with something deeper, conviction. She tore the agreement in half and threw it into the fire. "We're done asking for permission. Now we tell the world." The screen faded to black. A single line appeared. "Cliffmore Valley. What's buried will rise when the snow melts." End credit. Evelyn and Landon stand atop a quiet ridge, overlooking Silver Pine Haven. The town lights flicker below, still, calm, as if nothing ever happened. But they know better. The game has just begun again. Jace Whitmore, lead engineer on the reconstruction of Cliffmore Valley's main thoroughfare, was assigned to stabilize a sinkhole near the eastern woods. an area long sealed off under the guise of geological instability. But from the first day of surveying, Jace knew something was wrong. Beneath the permafrost, his team uncovered a concrete grid, ancient, corroded, and completely absent from any state infrastructure records. Digging deeper, they stumbled upon a sealed bunker, not a fallout shelter, not a utility facility. It was a data archive. At the center, a rusted iron cabinet, labeled in fading red. Glenhaven Protocol, closed. One of his crew tried to pry it open. Instantly, a high-pitched alert blared from the command truck's computer system. An automatic uplink triggered to Willowshade Hall. That night, on his way back to the inn, Jace was stopped by two men in maintenance uniforms. One clamped a hand on his shoulder and leaned in. "If you think this is a civil project, walk away before it becomes your grave." But Jace didn't walk away. Instead, he uploaded drone footage of the dig to a secured server. With it, he left a note. "If I disappear, dig deeper. Not through soil, but through lies." The screen fades to black. Then a single line appears. "Cliffmore Valley, you thought it was buried. It was just waiting." End credit. On Jace's computer, a 3D rendering of Cliffmore Valley flickers to life. Red zones spread across the map, creeping outward until nearly all of Silver Pine Haven glows crimson. The truth isn't underground, it's everywhere. Seraphina Blythe, the only full-time doctor still working at the small clinic near the Lantern Fork, had seen plenty over the years. But this was different. Patients began arriving with flu-like symptoms, fevers, fatigue, disorientation. But the meds didn't work. The tests all came back clean. And then, one by one, they disappeared. No funerals, no records, just silence. One late night, her phone rang, an unlisted number. The voice on the other end whispered, "You're not treating an illness. You're calming it, just long enough for them to take what they need." Panicked, but unwilling to back down, Seraphina made her way to Willowshade Hall, digging through the dusty basement archives. That's where she found it, a file stamped GV-D94, a behavioral modification virus, once trialed right here in Cliffmore Valley. On her way home, a truck veered into her path, forcing her to a stop. A man in a blank mask approached her window. "If you keep spreading this, you'll be the next patient." But Seraphina didn't stop. That night, she live-streamed the documents, every page. She attached a list of the missing, each name read with trembling clarity. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked into the camera. "I don't need you to believe me. I just need you to look closer at your town. Because when the truth is buried long enough, we're the next ones to vanish." The screen cuts to black. A single line fades in. "This is no longer a disease. This is a warning." End credit. Footage from Seraphina's clinic camera. She sits at her desk, writing notes in her journal. Outside the glass door, beneath the glowing sign that reads, "Open 24/7, a man stands perfectly still, not blinking, not moving, just watching. In a town where darkness doesn't lurk in alleyways, but stares straight at you from the eyes of the powerful. Cliffmore Valley has never been kind to those who choose to stand in the light. And in that tangled portrait of secrets and silence, Seraphina Blythe, an unremarkable doctor by name, chose the hardest path to speak the truth, knowing full well it might cost her life. She had no weapons, no obvious allies, just a stethoscope, a worn notebook, and a heart that refused to look away from what was wrong. While the town pretended not to see, she looked directly at it. While others stayed silent to stay safe, she chose to speak and to face whatever followed. The lesson here isn't just courage, it's empathy. Seraphina didn't act for glory or legacy. She acted for the patients whose hands she once held, for the names quietly erased from files, names no one bothered to ask about. Life doesn't demand we save the world. It simply asks that we don't turn away when someone is drowning right in front of us. No statues will be built in her honor. No headlines will scream her name. But a single string of decoded data, cracked by her persistence, saved hundreds from being written off as naturally gone. Because sometimes quiet kindness is the boldest form of bravery we have left in this world.